Oh, yeah. Well, I had a little trouble getting a taxi cab over here. Taxi cab pulled up in front of my hotel, and I said, I tried to open the door, and he said, no. And I said, aren't you a taxi cab driver? And he said, yes. He said, but I can't pick people up here. And I said, well, then move up a couple feet. And that's what it is in front of the hotel. I said, just move a couple of feet over. I said, my wife is handicapped. I said, she can't stand for very long. I want to put her in the taxi. And he said, well, we have rules that have to be followed. And I said, we're in Ireland, for heaven's sakes. This is one of the few countries that's still a banana republic and should be proud of it. It's one of the things I love about this country. Somebody once said, in Ireland, no means you haven't talked to the right person yet. I mean, I like it. They've made so many rules. Where I used to live, I just couldn't take it anymore. They not only were the government making so many rules, the building I lived in went mad. I mean, absolutely mad. There was we all have condominiums in the building, and they had a homeowners association. And when I was like the third person to move in, and you got a book this big with rules. Things like, don't shoot your neighbor. If you have a dog, don't let it crap in the hallway. And if you're going to have loud music at night, the building's totally soundproofed. Keep your door closed so it doesn't go down the hall. Simple things like that. Don't park in other people's parking spots. And inside of 2 years, the book turned into something this thick. Because they met every week, they all felt obligated to make up new rules. However, they didn't have that good decision, bad decision thing. So, and then they went one step further, because I don't pay any attention to them. I just stay at my place, and I come and I go, and I don't bother anybody, and if somebody bothers me, I tell them not to. Most of them can kind of remember that I lived there, but after that, it's all very blurry. But then I got a note. I'd been gone for 5 months. I was traveling around Europe. And I got a note. When I travel, my dog goes and stays with my mother, who lives, 500 miles away. But I got a note. Somebody sent me my mail, and in the mail was a note from the homeowners associations telling me to appear before the disciplinary committee because my dog had bit someone 3 weeks ago. And the dog hadn't been there in 4 months, right? And it was one of my neighbors that I didn't get along with. And if anybody would have bit him, it would have been me. I don't let my dog do work I want to do myself, okay? The ball thing, the dog can do, but when it comes to this guy, I don't like this guy. This guy thinks he's God's gift to women, and he works for an airline and has a uniform, but really all he does is stand behind a desk and take 2 hours to find something on a computer that should take 5 minutes. But he always had a different girl there every other night, and he would always cook the same thing and say the same lines and play the same fucking music and leave his door open. And then he would go out on the back porch and call his friends on the phone and brag about it. And so I tried closing my window, I tried everything, and then finally I said, look, if you're going to act like a total dickhead, at least do it inside your own apartment. I don't want to hear about this stuff. So I finally started recording him and then playing it over the radio. I have a friend that works for one of the alternative radio stations, and he's such a weirdo that what we started doing was playing it all over San Francisco. So then every woman in San Francisco found out about this guy. And they actually put a column in one of the free presses where they drew cartoons of this guy. They called him Mr. Suave. And this guy lied about which car was his. In the car, there's a guy there that's a very famous musician, has a beautiful Ferrari, and as he'd walk by, go, yes, don't you love my car? And this guy was such a phony. But the truth about him is he was a miserable cuss. He was always constantly, he'd get up in the morning and he'd crankily walk down the hall, and he could never get his mailbox open. I guess there was something wrong with the lock. So, I think revenge is something that should be done very slowly and over a really long period of time. I don't like to vent my anger at people. I like to gnaw at them for years. It's that kind of thing. For example, one of the greatest events of my life is that I'm going to release my autobiography the day after I die. And I know things about people, lots of people. And I signed things saying I would never in my entire life let anyone know about it. So the day after I die, everybody's going to know about it. Plus, when I owned the security company that I won in the poker game, by the way, because of the lie detector machines, I had these guys that worked for me that were private detectives that were just geniuses. I mean, these guys could do things. And one time somebody tried to take away a company I owned. They filed a big lawsuit and they did stock things. And these guys went absolutely nuts without my even asking them, because I didn't really care about the company that much. It wasn't that important to me. I figured what I do requires skill. So as soon as I'm gone, then owning the company is not going to do much good. In fact, it did go bankrupt without me. I tricked them too. I really did something that probably no one has done. I owned 100% of the stock. And I was chairman of the board and president of the company. And they created some fraudulent thing to make stock. But I went in and, as chairman of the board, I fired myself as president of the company. Then I resigned from the board. And I gave my stock to the police. Donated it to the police athletic league. And left. And once I was gone, then all they had was the police wanting to know why they weren't getting money from the stock, getting the district attorney to go in and review everything in the company, and since I fired myself as president of the company, I sued the company itself for firing me for no reason. So these people then had to hire a lawyer and defend the actions of the chairman of the board of the directors, who, who's no longer there at the company, so he's no longer responsible for firing the president of the company, who is being paid quite a large salary, and it's treble action damages, so we're talking about a $40 million lawsuit. And of course it never went to trial because I don't like lawsuits. I just like the publicity and the fear. That was enough for me. It was that when they get the papers and they're served with giant things of papers. And of course, over the years, I've trained thousands and thousands of attorneys. But attorneys don't really necessarily like the way I like to do things. They tell you in depositions, don't say anything. But the truth is, when they ask questions, you can answer in as much detail as you would like. And in any tonality you want. And using any expression. And I've had attorneys plead with me to stop after just the first question. They said, so can you describe your profession? And I do, in great detail, much longer than this seminar. And I used New Jersey tonality the entire time, because I was born in New Jersey, and that Jersey accent never really goes away. It stays with you all the time, and it's always available at all times. Of course, on the transcript, none of that comes out. I've had stenographers stop and look at me and go, I'm not involved in this, And I go, sorry. Because to me, it doesn't matter to me. I said, no one can take away from me the most important thing I have, which is my skill. And, and they can't take away my children because they're not leaving. And my kids are 30 years old, too. It doesn't get any cheaper, I found out. I had this illusion after they were 18 it was going to get cheaper. It doesn't, it gets more expensive. My daughter called me on the phone 30 days ago and said, Dad, I found a house I want to buy. And I went, that's nice, dear. You're vice president of a company. You're just informing me of this, aren't you? And she said, well, actually. And I went, oh, God, here it comes. It was bad enough when we needed a little money for a car, but a house? She lives in Berkeley, California. This is like buying a flat in Mayfair in London, I mean, you don't buy houses for a couple of $100,000, You think Dublin's expensive? You can't rent a garage for less than $500,000 in Berkeley. And, and it's just totally ridiculous. So anyway, but after I talked to her, I couldn't remember what she had talked about. I just found myself writing checks. It's been like that with my family for years, but I don't mind. My wife taught me something about that. A lot of people feel bad about money. They go, I feel bad because I don't have money. And they feel bad because they do. People win the lottery, and then they think, people only like me for my money. I had somebody come in and tell me, you know, this guy inherited $10 million in 1970, 10 million US dollars, tax-free. And he was miserable as can be. He was depressed, he was a depressive, and he was on the edge of suicide. And he came in and he said, I just don't think anybody likes me except for my money. And I went, you're right. I said, I don't like you. And you've only been here 4 minutes. I said, your psychiatrist wrote me this note, and it says in there, he doesn't like you. He said, I referred this patient because I can't stand listening to him. I said, if your psychiatrist can't even stand listening to you, you must just be a real shit. I said, and before you had this money, did you have any friends? He went, no. And I said, so the money didn't really help. It just made you notice that people didn't like you. Really had nothing to do with it, did it? I said, if you're worried about the money, making it so you can't tell people who like you from those that don't, get rid of it. He goes, well, I wouldn't do that. He said, well, you're willing to kill yourself, but you're not willing to give away the money. That makes a lot of sense. I said, or you could just learn to be nice. That would be an alternative to everything. I know people don't think about this as the alternative. The trick is that if you make it so it's a joy to be around you, you'll attract joyous people. Now I have to tell you about the most important piece of research that I think has been done in the history of civilization. A group of scientists, and don't ask me how they got this idea, but they took a yogurt culture, and yogurt's not like the smartest thing on the planet, but it's smarter than the researchers. They made a yogurt culture, they divided it in half, and attached half of it to the equivalent of galvanic skin response, something that could measure the electrical activity in the yogurt. And then they poured milk on the other half of the yogurt, which is what yogurt eats. Yogurt eats milk. But when this half got fed, the half with the electrical stimulus stuff began to respond immediately. It knew the other half was being fed. And the scientists went, wow, ESP. And in yogurt just tells you about evolution. Yogurt is more evolved than scientists. So they tried pushing it further and further apart, but still the yogurt knew what the other yogurt was up to. They put lead walls in between it, and still yogurt knew yogurt. It's just that simple. They tried all measures of the electromagnetic spectrum, and yet every time they fed the yogurt, the other yogurt knew what was going on. So at the end of their rope, because people never come to me first, by the way, that's not the way it works. People don't go, I'm feeling a little depressed, I think I'll go see Richard. Nah, they spend 8-9 years in therapy. They go through mega vitamin treatments. They hug trees. They go to naked seminars in California where they sit around in hot tubs and try and pretend like it doesn't bother them to have their clothes off with total strangers. And of course, to me, I think when I take my clothes off, I want to be affected when I see other people naked, especially women. I want that to affect me. I don't know which psychologist decided looking at people naked shouldn't affect you, but my guess is his sex life doesn't amount to much. He wants to make it so that when you look at the universe, it affects you not at all. He wants to be less than yogurt. Now, when they contacted me, they told me what happened, and they said, what do you think's going on? Now, here's the funny thing. The reason they called me is I had destroyed $5 million worth of research in 10 minutes. I went to visit this big place, and they had these rats running down mazes. And the rats would run down and find the cheese. And they said they were called behaviorists, and behaviorists believed that all learning was done because implicit muscle movements. So the rat, somehow or other, the muscles do go 5 steps, do 6 steps, and you find the cheese. According to these psychologists, rats don't think. Now, this tells me one thing. They did not grow up in the same city I did. Rats not only think, they plan and use blueprints. Okay, rats are smart animals, especially city rats. They can find, it's amazing. You can go in buildings where there are no rats. When they tear them down, 500,000 come out of the middle of nowhere and run up and down the streets. And they have had nests and family lives and everything's going on. But the researchers told me, they don't think they... And I said, and you prove this? They said, oh, yes, we proved this. And they showed me volumes of research and hours of testing. And I said, when a rat runs, does it use the same muscles as when it swims? And they said, of course not. I said, watch this. And I put wax inside the maze, filled the maze with water, put the cheese in, dropped the rat in, and it swam right to the cheese. So everything they were doing was wrong. Bye-bye research grant, bye-bye institute. So they all went out and wrote other grants, got other jobs. And when they got stuck on the yogurt phenomenon, they called me up and came in and told me, they said, what do you think's going on here? And I said, well, when you pluck a piano string, another piano string vibrates. It's called a sympathetic vibration. Ancient pagans believed that magic was done with, there's two kinds of magic, high ritual magic and sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic, voodoo people build a doll that looks like somebody, take a piece of their hair, or what we like to call DNA, and they stick a pin in this, or they put herbs on this, and it affects the human. By having you see, we're discovering lots more about that voodoo really has a kind of a solid DNA base to it that seems like these voodoo priests somehow or other figured out about DNA and all kinds of stuff. But as it turns out that when things vibrate that have the same nature, things and other things in the universe vibrate. Now as physicists, we're beginning to discover that this may be the way to do space travel, that you may be able to resonate things in magnetic fields and actually have them appear on the opposite side of magnetic fields. The experiment that was done was actually done in my laboratory. We created a magnetic field about 20 yards across and a stable magnetic field, and then in it we created an instant electromagnetic field, a false thing done with electricity. And on the other side, every part of the magnetic field changed instantly. There was not a wave phenomenon. When this changed, this over here changed. Same thing happened with the yogurt, by the way. Opposite ends of the linear accelerator at Stanford fed this yogurt over there knew what was going on, and there was no time differentiation. It was instantaneous. And I have a love for everything that physicists can't explain. I did a seminar on Einstein's 100th birthday for people at Livermore Labs, gave each of them a little box of stuff, and one by one we went through anomalies of science. Anomalies are things that we have no answers to and we can't even make up excuses. For example, we have no idea how magnets work. They put the magnet on the top of the table, the one on the bottom of the table, and move it around. We don't know why. We have no explanation for it, and we're not even close to getting one. There's only two substances which are impervious to magnetism, and they're both artificially made. They were made for the space shuttle. I use them. I do good magic tricks with them. Actually make cards, glue new metal on there, put it on top of my briefcase, which has a 5,000 gauze electromagnet in it. By the way, the reason I have that is because when I turn it on, if anybody has audio tapes, they go blank. I find this is very helpful when I go to court. When they go to play depositions that they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on, I put my briefcase and I turn the handle, and every tape recording of any kind within 300 yards is now blank, including the one they're making at that moment. You know, as we all sit there, if somebody has a fluorescent light, it might light up. But in the meanwhile, actually you can watch the room gets brighter as that happens, because the fluorescent lights in a courtroom suddenly gets bright in there. One of my friends is a nurse. She's a black lady, about 75, and her son was arrested on a drug charge. And this guy was absolutely framed. Guy at work asked him, he said, will you give me a ride home? And he said, sure. So I drove home, and when the guy went up to the stairs, he yelled down, he said, oh, I left my briefcase in the car. Why don't you bring it up and we'll have a cup of coffee? So he grabbed the briefcase, he walked up the stairs, set it on the table, and the police arrested him. And they videotaped him, and they opened the briefcase, and it was full of cocaine. So they were going to send him to prison, probably for like 25 years. I don't know if the police arranged this or, if this guy was a drug dealer and then said he'd get him a bigger drug deal. I don't know, nor did I really care. So I just went to court with my briefcase, sat behind the district attorney, put my briefcase down and went like this as he brought all the evidence in and set it under the table, right? And as he went there, and then he started out his case by showing the videotape, and there was nothing on it. So he pulled out the backup tape, and there was nothing on that either. And the judge yelled at him, and he said that he had one in his office. And I thought, didn't think about that. This guy made an extra copy. And so I said to the district attorney, I said, I need to talk to you about another case. Can I walk to your office with you? And he said, sure. So I went down there, and we walked all the way down, and as we were walking back, and then he got in, and he put that tape in. Didn't work either. Thrown out of court. To me, there's always a technological solution to everything. There's a way to do everything. But I thought what they were doing to this young kid was just unacceptable. And this lady had been a nurse, and she had helped lots and lots of people. And when she came to me, she came to me because she had a nervous breakdown. And the psychiatrist said, he said, I try to talk to her, and she yells at me and slaps me. And she was a big lady. It was really great. She would go, they shouldn't have done, my son wouldn't be a liar. Bam! And he goes, well, maybe your son is a drug dealer. And bam! She'd hit him again. So they sent her to me because they said, well, nobody hits Richard. And I said, that's not actually true. It's just they don't usually get to do it again. That's not my policy. My policy is give to those who give to you, plus or minus 2. And when it's minus, look out, because my imagination can get really weird. So I said to them, so why are you so upset that yogurt knows yogurt? I said, don't you think the same thing is true about human beings? Because the truth is, that when people start getting depressed, the people around them get depressed. When you get people to start being violent, everybody starts getting violent. It's all kinds of stuff, and not just in one place on the planet, all over the damn place. We can affect one another. The question is, who can hold the vibration the most steady? Now, I tried to explain to them that it's really a simple phenomenon. I said, when I work with clients, I don't establish rapport by going into their state of depression and bringing them out. I stay happy as can be until they have to give up. It's just that simple. People who can't be hypnotized, I don't care who told them that. Usually it's a post-hypnotic suggestion. Their belief that they can't alter their state of consciousness. People do it all the time. How many times have you been sitting behind a car at a stoplight and the light changes and the guy in front of you doesn't? They're just there. These people will look at you and go, I cannot go into a trance. And I usually go, well, not a good one. But that doesn't mean just because you haven't done something doesn't mean that you can never do it. The fact that, I asked this depressive once, I said, have you ever been happy all day for a whole day? And he said, never. And I said, that's because you don't know how. You're not good at it, so you're going to spend the day with me. And I want you to try as hard as you can in vain to remain depressed. Now. And I went into a state of feeling absolutely wonderful and just stared at him. And he went, I feel funny. I said, that's happiness. You're just not used to it. And he goes, you can't just look at somebody and make them happy. And I went, of course you can. Yogurt can do it. I should be more talented than yogurt, don't you think? I mean, they said, because they told me, they said, Dr. Bandler, we can't really allow you to work with patients in our hospitals because you don't have the proper degrees. And I said, well, as far as I can tell, having those degrees, and you can't work with them, means having the degree would get in your way. Means that if you are a PhD psychologist, you have been guaranteed to have been taught things that won't help these people. So you're going to have to go beyond the schooling that you get. Those of you who learned about psychology in college, got to go further. Everything that I learned about physics, I learned not from studying physics. I studied physics and the things they did that worked, but the stuff they didn't know how to do, we have to find out. That's why the first thing I did was start a research and development company. Now, I told these guys, I said, well, the first thing we got to do is to make a little thing. You guys have millions of dollars in research money, And you can't build anything that stops yogurt from knowing each other. And I would like an answer to the following question. Why don't you want the yogurt to know that the other yogurt is drinking the milk? I said, you guys a little short on things to do? You know, not getting any at night or something? I mean, what's the story here? Seems to me that doctors, PhDs, I mean, we're talking 3 or 4 dozen of them, highly paid people, making $250,000 a year, and they're trying to outwit yogurt. There are people in hospitals. There are depressed individuals. There are violent criminals. There are mentally retarded children. There's a lot of work to be done on this planet. If we're going to change the world in a way and make it the one we want to live in, we got to get out there and let the yogurt talk, okay? I said, now, if I can stop the yogurt from talking, you have to promise me the next thing you do will be devoted to trying to help mentally retarded children or something worthwhile. Unfortunately, in Palo Alto, there's a place called the Center for Mental Retardation. And as far as I can tell, having met the staff, it seems to be working. They even gave me their card, mentally retarded counselor. Mental retardation specialist. Alcoholic counselor, stop drinking, it'll be okay. That's just a behavior, you know, excuse me. When people's behaviors are out of control, then you teach them how to put them in control by building controls in. And I do it very literally. I don't fuck around. I put them in a trance, and I put a knob in their mind that clicks off. And when they hit too much alcohol, it stops and makes it so they get absolutely nauseous if they even think about drinking. They have to drink a certain amount of water before they can do anything again. Guess what? They did pain control for a long time. They hypnotized people and put switches in their head so they could turn the pain off and have people drill their teeth. Why shouldn't we put other switches and knobs in your mind? How about just an adrenaline button? You know, so people get up in the morning and they go, I can't get motivated. And I go, well, let me tell you what I have in your mind. I stop and I say to yourself, now, if you had a knob right here, big red knob, and at the moment you pressed it, adrenaline rushed into your system. It'd be like if the button got pressed and somebody went, ah! And all of that rush that comes into your system was there. Then I wait a while and I go, cool, huh? Now you can add it and you can make it stronger. You can do all these things. The ability of your brain to do these things is your birthright. Now, if instead we theorize about what causes the lack of motivation in human beings, because I've met experts all over the world. They used to hire me to do panel discussions. By the way, I don't get hired for that anymore. I win every time. But I went to places like Oxford, and there were experts on such subjects. One of the panels that I was on was about abnormal personality. And I was the only one who had one, so I considered myself the world's leading expert. All of these guys are exactly the same. They all looked at me and said, it's such a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Bandler. And I said, we'll see. They sat there like this, so I said, now, what's the subject we're going to discuss today? And they said, well, we realize that you have some radical ideas on how you should treat patients that suffer from apathy and depression. And I said, are you going to ask me a question or what? That was a statement. This is about what you've heard. It has nothing to do with me whatsoever. Don't you guys speak English? And they said, we are English. And I said, that's not what I asked you. You're having trouble again, see? When I ask a question, you have to answer it, or I do mean things to you. Have you guys heard about operant conditioning? And they went, well, of course we understand operant conditioning. And I went, let me show you how it works. You don't ask me an intelligent question, I induce pain. You ask me an intelligent question, I answer it and make you feel good. Now they do it to dogs. They showed me their own research. They took these dogs, and I like dogs. You shouldn't fuck with dogs, and let me know about it. These guys gave me their research studies. They took these dogs and they went in and they showed the dog a circle. And the dog walked up to the circle and it stepped on a button in front of it and food came out. And then they put a C next to it. And the dog went over and it touched it and it gave it an electric shock. Then the next day, they opened the circle up a little bit and closed the C a little bit. And the dog could still tell them apart, like, food, stay away from that. And then they switched them back and forth and did it till they got closer and closer. To the dog went, I don't know what button to press. You know, and they said the dog becomes very schizophrenic. And I said, well, I know how to solve this problem. Stop torturing it. And they said, well, we want to know what this has to do with human beings. I said, oh. Human beings will do shitty stuff like this to dogs. Dogs wouldn't do that. And they said, no, we want to know what it means about schizophrenic human beings. I said, it doesn't mean anything about schizophrenic human beings. And they said, well, you know Gregory Bateson's double-bind schizophrenia? I said, yeah, and I know how to do it, too. You're about to find out. I said, let me show you how it works. You mention anything about hurting dogs again, and guess what will happen? And they all went, and I went, and slapped 4 of them right across the face. And they didn't even believe it. Sitting out in the audience is 500 Oxford scholars. And I said, let me repeat that question. And the one guy goes, that wasn't a question, was it? And I said, now you're listening. Said, you are a good boy, feel good. And he went like this, and I said, now, let me show you how good you can feel. And I just looked at him and changed my state. I said, yeah, because he looked really tense. I don't know what it is about being an Oxford scholar. I guess when you get a job there, the first thing they do is take you in a room, take a large corn cob and shove that motherfucker up your ass. Because otherwise they would